Why does your kid look like a wizard on the practice field, but freezes or disappears during matches? That look on their face when they realize the situation they're in is not one they've seen before, and they're out of their depth and in deep trouble. I've been there myself, both as the player in question and as a parent and coach, and it's why it's been my obsession really to figure out the why and crucially the how for overcoming that freeze. I'm a sports physio and I've been on a journey the last 10 plus years to figure out the answers to that question. Today, I'll show you the biological reasons why your kid freezes during games but flourishes and looks like a world beater in practice. All science-backed and with practical tips for how you can overcome those challenges at home. I'll even give you a way to shortcut part of the learning process at the end of the video. Just as a quick intro to the biology of the freeze, we have this thing called perception-action coupling. And in a game, your kid must see and do something simultaneously. And this is linked at all times, and your kid must see the opponent at the same time as they do the change of direction, for instance. Because what they see will influence what they do, and likewise, what they do will influence what they see. This freeze in a match is most often not a mental block. It's the biological delay caused when the brain tries to find a solution it has never practiced in context. There are literally missing connections between brain neurons because the problem your kid is seeing in that game has never been practiced in a training session. And this very understandably leads to stress. I mean, who wouldn't be stressed? When you have a problem, a test in front of you requiring ultra-fast answers, but you have no clue what the answer is. And this stress leads to tunnel vision. So under pressure, your kid literally cannot see the solutions that might seem so obvious from the sidelines. It's because physically, they only see what they're fully focused on and can't see which opportunities are outside of that. When your kid can't find a solution, their confidence naturally drops, further narrowing that ability to perceive the game, to see the game, and you have a negative spiral. Not ideal. Now, your kid isn't freezing because they lack talent. They're freezing because their training has decoupled their eyes, what they see, from their feet, what they do. And when we use these factory drills or isolated repetitions in cone drills, for instance, we teach the brain to look for a specific recipe or following the programming instead of looking at what the game tells them. When the game doesn't match the recipe or what's been programmed, the brain hits an error code. And that's what you see when your kid freezes. As I said, training traditionally has sought to instill these recipes or algorithms, which are just recipes for machines really, in the players. And this often fails to transfer to the game because the information, that is defenders, space, teammates, timing, even the occasion, is missing from those drills. This traditional coaching, where we treat kids like machines on an assembly line, repeating the same movement until it's perfect somehow, lacks this information. So we've created robots who are great at following a recipe and they can perform a drill perfectly, maybe even blindfolded, but they can't handle the game. Instead, what we want are those master chefs who understand the ingredients, the information about defenders, space, teammates, timing, occasion, and so on. They understand that information of the game and can adapt when things go wrong, because they will go wrong more than once. Youth players often take too long to decide because they're recalling a drill rather than seeing the solution. And great players don't just look at the ball, they scan for information, and these perfectly aligned drills, these factory drills, tend to teach players to look only at the ball, or even worse, at a cone. So this is the why for your kids freezing in the game. The brain doesn't have the physical connections to be adaptable because the training hasn't prepared them for what they are encountering in the game. To stop the freeze, we must shift from being puppet masters or joystick coaches. We must go away from building and assembling a player to more of a gardener who's growing a player. We can use something called the constraints-led approach. It's not really important what it's called though, so the important part is that practice should in some way or form look like a real game. So in a coach-led practice, instead of breaking football down into isolated skills, which we also call deconstructing, which is what engineers typically do, we must instead simplify the game while somehow keeping it as real as possible. So we do maybe a 2v2 instead of a 11v11, and the same principles of the game are there, but there's a lot less to think about and to keep track of when you only have 3 other players than your kid, and instead of those 21 other players when playing 11v11. Every practice should have this representative design, so it should include a target, typically a goal or multiple goals, opponents, and choices to make. Now, if your kid doesn't have to make a choice, it fails the test. And if the choice is where to place a shot, as is typical in a finishing or shooting drill, it's far less effective at transferring to the game than if your kid plays on a very small field where players constantly shoot. I also promised to give you a fix that you can do at home. And here it is. Encourage small-sided games in the backyard or even in the street where the environment creates a challenge itself. Now, if your kid is serious about getting better and, importantly, is motivated and having fun while playing football, block out this time so that they actually get to play. Because the most important play is that without adult interference. And this kind of play is where kids couple their perception, what they see, and their action, what they do, most naturally. It's where they're more comfortable trying new skills or tricks or explore what they look at. And the stakes are way lower, and it'll benefit them hugely in both the short and the long term. So what's the shortcut I teased then? Well, we often think that a perfect practice is one where no mistakes happen. In reality, that might be a bit of a wasted session, because to improve at maximum speed, your kid should fail between 20 and 40% of the time. If they succeed 100% of the time, they're not searching for new solutions. They're just confirming what they already know. And this is just keeping them at the same level with the same chance of freezing as before. Failing is the signal that the brain is currently rewiring itself, literally. So if you want a wizard on game day, you and your kid must tolerate the mess of learning and failing during the week. And remember, action, what you do, is linked to perception, what you see. So seeing and doing are two sides of the same coin. If you change what your kid sees in practice, you change how they act in a game. And this biological truth will be as valid 17 years from now as it is today. If you want to learn how these traditional drills are also more likely to get your kid injured, watch this video next.